What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one we are talking about the wildcard ahead of game week 28. A much requested video this week. Some people have already pressed the wildcard button. They're thinking about kind of drafts and trying to manage the next few game weeks. Some people aren't quite sure whether they want to use it this week. You don't have to activate the chip straight away. You can give it some thought as well first. So we're going to look through some advantages, disadvantages, general chip use, and then obviously look at some drafts and some players and stuff like that as well. So if you do enjoy it, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Help support the channel, much appreciated. Let's start off with advantages. So first one's pretty obvious. You can prepare for double game week 28-29 and also kind of cover off blank game week 30 all in one go, right? So it is possible to do that. In some scenarios, depending on how many free hit chips you've got left, you might want a free hit in game week 30, but we'll come on to that later on. You can clear any deadwood from like the last few weeks. I put game week 20-27. It could have been 21-27, whatever, right? Could be Watford forwards. It could be that you just don't want triple walls anymore. Whatever you've done over the last few weeks, you can start to look to kind of clear some of those players out that you kind of hate at this point, right? You obviously get to see who's playing in game week 30. Now, I've talked about this a lot, but essentially whoever goes through from the Premier League, from the FA Cup 5th round, which are being played midweek, I think it's mostly on Tuesday and Wednesday this week, whoever wins their matches, their match in game week 30 will then be off, and obviously their opponent won't be able to play either. Right now we know there's 3 games on. If there's some cup upsets, there might be some more games on, right? So you will know for sure who's playing in game week 30. The reason I'm recording this video before all the matches are finished is, one, there's just not enough time to wait and then do all the videos after the FA Cup. But 2, I just think the way the fixtures are kind of set out, there aren't going to be too many upsets. And if there are, we'll cover it off in future videos anyway. You can take advantage of Chelsea's double game week in 28. Again, that should happen. I think it's very unlikely at this point it doesn't happen. So obviously you can take advantage of that, which anyone who took hits recently or wildcard in game week 26 is a little bit more difficult to do. Whether or not it's a good option, again, we'll talk about that when we go through the drafts, but it is possible to kind of double or triple up on Chelsea if you wanted to. They've got really good fixtures to come. And obviously one of the advantages for wildcarding this week rather than wildcard in game week 26 was you got to triple captain Salah, which was pretty big. It's not necessarily an advantage right now, but it has been an advantage waiting to, you know, even if your wildcard ends up being similar to game week 26 wildcards, at least you got to triple captain Salah, so that's good. The disadvantage is the game week 29 bench boost looks pretty weak. Now, again, you might come up with a better draft than me, but I've given it quite a lot of thought. Even though I'm not on the wildcard, I have thought about different drafts quite a bit, and I cannot really come up with one where the game week 29 bench boost is that great. It's not awful, but it doesn't really, I don't know, it's just not a huge amount of confidence in it with the players that you've got to put on there. There's like a couple of Wolves players against Everton, maybe like Ramsey against West Ham. It's just not ideal. You could wait until game week 36 to bench boost, because from what a lot of people are saying, kind of Ben Crellin, James from Planet FPL, that game week is going to be pretty big with the amount of doublers we have, and the chances are you might get there with a good bench anyway. But the problem is you just don't know. It is quite far away, so you have to kind of decide which one to do. Go for the weaker bench boost, then not have to worry long term, or try and wait for the better one and just hope that it all falls into place. You've obviously got no wildcard for after game week 31. There's still fixtures to rearrange. You'd be closer to the game week 36 bench boost if you saved your wildcard a little bit longer. That could be an advantage or a disadvantage, right? Obviously, it is a disadvantage, but if you use it now, you get a bunch of advantages as well. In some of the drafts I've looked at, if you want to go fairly heavy on Arsenal, you might have to bench them this week just because of the players you'd want to play. Again, you'll see that when I come onto the drafts. That's not ideal. And some of the best players for game week 29 also blank in game week 30, so it would be very handy if West Ham beat Southampton in the FA Cup, so that Southampton's fixture was on in game week 30 against Burnley. The likes of Broja, maybe Ward-Prowse, Livramento, players like that would be super handy to have in your team for their double game week, then also play in game week 30. So we really need to keep an eye on the West Ham fixture and all the FA Cup fixtures. But I don't think there's just not a right or a wrong answer. If your team's in a mess, it might be worth using right now. If you can get through without using it, that also could be a big advantage, right? Having that wild card for the end of season run-in with a bunch of players and fixtures still to rearrange, getting closer to that game week 36 bench boost, that could be ideal. As always, it's going to be team dependent. If your team needs it now, I don't think it's an awful decision at all. And in a lot of ways, it probably help you. Let's look at kind of chip use, and then we'll come on on to the drafts. All right, I'm going to just quickly talk about a little bit of chip use, right? If you use your wildcard this week, when will you then be looking to use your chips? And to be honest, there's way more than just 2 options, and I'm going to talk through slightly different versions of what I've got on the screen as well. I can't go through every single different chip setup. There's just too many for one video. But yeah, if you're using your wildcard this week, the first option is if you've got 2 free hits left. So one of the options is to use your free hit in game week 30. What that's going to allow you to do is really load up on Arsenal, Spurs and Liverpool players, right? And you might be thinking, well, I can do that anyway, and you absolutely can. But out of those 3 teams, bearing in mind Spurs and Liverpool fixtures after game week 30 are pretty good, and Arsenal's aren't too bad either, only Arsenal play in game week 30. It's very unlikely that Spurs or Liverpool will be playing in game week 30. So you could free hit to get a much better team, but also make your kind of game week 28-29 team a little bit better as well, and have a better team after game week 30. That's if you've got 2 free hits left. Now you could choose to then either bench boost in 29 if you think that the bench is strong enough, or you could save it until game week 36. If you save your bench boost till 36, obviously you can't free hit that week as well. So you'd probably then be looking at using it in game week 33, where there could be some fixtures off. And if not, there'll probably be a little bit of a kind of small bumper double game week, right? Where you might not have all the players you want, so you can use your free hit, get them in, and obviously then lose them afterwards. The other alternative would be, if you bench boost in game week 29, you could then, if you don't need that free hit in 33, save it until the big double game week in game week 36. So that's one of the options. If you've only got 1 free hit left, you could use it in game week 30, but I think realistically you're probably better off kind of balancing your squad a little bit so you can cover 28, 29 and 30 and just save the free hit for later. Game week 33 probably would be the best time. Again, fixtures may get rearranged in a way where this is all like just wrong, but right now this is kind of what we're going off. And again, you could bench boost in 29 or 36. And again, if you bench boost in 29, you could then save that free hit from 33 and use it in 36 instead. So you've got different options depending on whether you've got 1 or 2 free hits left. And by the way, just because you got 2 doesn't mean you have to use 1 in game week 30, but I do think it lets you change your squad a little bit by doing that, right? Alternative options are to not wildcard this week, to wildcard in game week 29, and then to use your free hit in game week 30. The question then is, when do you bench boost? I think if you go for that strategy, you're pretty much saving your bench boost till game week 36 and just hoping that it works out okay. The reason you might want to do this is, if your team looks okay for 28, you can maybe make a transfer or maybe just a -4 to get a couple more double game week players in. You could then wildcard in game week 29, get all those kind of Arsenal, Liverpool, Spurs players who are looking good after game week 30, and then not worry that they're not playing in game week 30 because most of them are going to blank, and just use your free hit then. I don't think there's a massive advantage to delay until game week 29. If you want to get your bench boost out of the way, you are better off using your wildcard in game week 28, but it is an option depending on how your team looks for this week, and also how many of those kind of players you want to carry through on your team. Because one of the key differences you'll see in a minute is when you wildcard in game week 28 and you're trying to get through game week 30, you probably need quite a few Wolves players. But if you wildcard in 29, you've missed their double game week, so you don't have to carry them, and then you're free hitting in 30, so you don't have to carry them past then either. And like the likes of Jimenez just get rested. You really want double defense at this point. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But that's one of the reasons why delaying the wildcard till 29 could work. And obviously the other option is just to save your wildcard till after game week 31, which a lot of people will be doing. Prepare for the final stretch plus the doubles. You're wildcarding much closer to that game week 36 bench boost as well, so less kind of time for things to go wrong. But it's all going to be dependent on how your team looks right now. How well set up are you for the game week 28 and 29 doubles? If you're in a really bad state, it might be worth wildcarding now. Okay, I have gone round and round in circles with trying to put a draft together for this video. One thing I'm finding is there's a lot of different choices you can make this week compared to those of us that wildcarded in 26. Because we were trying to put together 26, 28, 29, and 30, a team to cover all of that in one go, the players kind of pick themselves. That's not the same this week. What I've also found is the free hit in game week 30, I don't think it's going to be needed in pretty much every scenario. In this particular draft, I've kind of forced it so that you have to use the free hit in Game Week 30. But I don't think it's my favourite kind of draft, to be honest with you. And it involves Harry Kane. I don't think that Kane is necessarily worth trying to force into your team. I do think he's a really good option right now, but I don't like the compromises that you may have to make depending on what your kind of squad value is, depending on if you've sold Cancelo and stuff like that as well. I'm not quite sure about it. I definitely don't like Salah, Kane and Son, and I think Salah and Son is probably kind of best of both worlds. But let's go through this draft first of all. So we're going to assume that Chelsea have got their double against Norwich, right? So you've got Chris Wood on the bench, who does have a double game week. You would have to decide whether to play him ahead of Salah or Trent. So maybe, let's say, you're crazy and you want to bench Trent, right? Which is probably okay for Chris Wood in a double game week. So you'd have a bench of Foster, Martinelli, Trent and Cancelo. The most annoying thing I found from Game Week 28 is your bench in Game Week 28 is probably better than your bench in 29, which makes the bench boost really annoying. Again, you might have found a better way of dealing with that, but that's what I found with all the tinkering so far. So you'd have Sarr with a double. All three of your defenders would have a double. So would Mount, so would Rafinha, so would Ramsey, so would Broja, Jimenez and Chris Wood. That's 10 double game week players for this week, right? That's pretty nice. Then you go on to Game Week 29. If we make the bench more realistic, right? So Ramsey would definitely go on the bench for Trent. Jimenez, I've left a lot of money in the bank for this draft, so you can actually afford Jimenez to Kane. So you get rid of Jimenez from your team for this week. Chris Wood's still got a double game week. You've got to put Martinelli in somewhere. Again, if you could afford Saka, you would definitely choose Saka over Martinelli, I think. And you'd probably put Livramento on the bench. James and Rudiger have only got single game weeks in 29, so you'd probably play Cancelo ahead of at least one. And I think it's fair to play Broja, Rafinha and Mount ahead of Rudiger. So that would be your bench in this draft. Foster, Livramento, Ramsey, Rudiger. It's not that exciting, right? And that's what I'm saying about the differences in benches. You may have found a way around it, but that's kind of what I ended up with, and it might be worth waiting until Game Week 36 to bench boost. So for this draft, you'd have Trent, Martinelli, Salah, Kane and Chris Wood doubling. So you'd have 10 in Game Week 28 and only 5 in Game Week 29. Obviously, you could set it up in a slightly different way if you wanted to, but I think that looks pretty good. And then when you get to Game Week 30, the only players that are definitely playing right now, and things might change after the FA Cup, we might have to readdress this, but I don't think there's going to be too many major upsets, is Sarr, Rafinha, Martinelli, and I think that's it, Ramsey, and that's it. So only 4 players definitely playing. If West Ham beat Southampton, then you'd have Broja and Livramento. That would only bring you up to 6. So you would pretty much have to free hit and then take this team forward, obviously, then into Game Week 31, where it doesn't look too bad, right? Because Chelsea's fixtures are really good. Man City's are pretty good. Liverpool's are decent as well. So going into Game Week 31 wouldn't be a problem with that free hit in Game Week 30. Just one quick thing. Even if you've got like 9 players for Game Week 30, it doesn't mean you can't use the free hit. Let's say you had 2 left and you want a bench boost in Game Week 36, there's no reason why you couldn't still free hit in 30 to get a full squad of 11 with some bench players as well, get the absolute best players in for that week, and then use the other one in 33. There's no reason you can't do that. So you don't have to have 11 or kind of 10 or 11 players before you decide to use the free hit, right, is what I'm trying to say. So even if you haven't gone for this team, and you've still got 9 players playing, there's no reason you couldn't still activate the free hit if you wanted to. But that's one draft. Let's talk about one that I would probably actually do instead. So I think if I was wildcarding this week, I'd maybe do something a little bit more balanced, right? So you would have a few more players for Game Week 30. You wouldn't have 11, depending on how kind of the cup competition goes and stuff like that. But you would have more than the previous draft, right? And I still think you'd have a pretty good team. Now with this side, there is some money in the bank, right? So I've basically done the squad so that I can afford Son instead of Coutinho, but because you've got transfers, you might as well try and get some extra fixtures out of it. So for this particular draft, and you could decide whether to bench all your Arsenal players and play Trent, or whichever way around you want to do it, you'd have Sarr, Livramento, James and Rudiger, Ramsey, Coutinho, Rafinha, Jimenez and Broja. So you'd have 9 double game week players for this week, right, in Game Week 28. Then when you move to Game Week 29, Coutinho, and by the way, Coutinho could be Mason Mount, basically any midfielder that you want for Game Week 28, you would then turn into Son. You'd obviously play all your Liverpool players instead of obviously whichever players you want to kind of bench instead. I'd probably play Broja against Watford and Rafinha against Norwich. So I guess I'd bench Livramento instead of Rudiger or Reece James. So that would then give you, and I've put Pickford on the bench. By the way, I know Pickford won't be popular, but if you can afford it, the game in 29, the double, is pretty good. And they also have some fixtures to rearrange after game week 30. So you'd have another double game week player on your bench just in case the Everton double suddenly gets sprung on you and you don't really have transfers to use it. Don't get me wrong, or to bring him in, don't get me wrong, the Everton defence is not exactly great. But Wolves at home and Newcastle at home, that seems pretty decent. He's always good for save points as well. So for this, you then have Pickford, Trent, Tierney, Salah, Saka, Son and Lacazette. So you'd have 7 double game week players. I've already forgotten how many we'd have in 28. But you'd have another 7 in 29. And then it would have been, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, so 9 and 7. That's pretty good. When you get to game week 30, if you put Sarr back in, you put Jimenez back in the team as well, and Ramsey instead of Rudiger, you'd have Sarr, Tierney, Rafinha, Saka, Ramsey, Lacazette and Jimenez. So you'd have 7 players for game week 30. You could also make a transfer to bring yourself back up to 8 as well. So if we do like Rudiger to Saiss, for example, who's playing Leeds, obviously he would then be playing against Rafinha, which is not necessarily ideal, but you would have another player in there. So Sarr and Saiss is 2, plus Tierney, Rafinha, Saka, Ramsey, Lacazette and Jimenez. That's 8. And if West Ham beat Southampton in the FA Cup, you'd also have Breyer and Livramento bringing you up to 10. Obviously, if Southampton win that FA Cup game, then it is what it is. Maybe you'll have to make a few more transfers or readjust your game week 28 side slightly. Or maybe if you've got those 2 free hits, maybe no matter which draft you go for in game week 28, you just free hit in game week 30 because what the hell, you've got to use it at some point. So I do think that is more in line with what I would do. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you would change about this draft. I think you cover off most of the good fixtures. One of the things it doesn't have is 3 Liverpool players, so you don't have Robertson in there. So you could drop Jimenez or Lacazette down to like Chris Wood or St. Maximin if you wanted to go for him instead, or maybe even a Watford striker if you want to keep one of them in your team, and then upgrade Rudiger to Robertson or Van Dijk if you wanted 3 Liverpool players instead of having the double game for Chelsea. But like I said, there's a lot of ways you can play around with this draft. There's a lot of changes you can make for this one. But I think the core is pretty good. And I quite like the idea of having Ramsey as just that cheap enabler on your bench that looks pretty nailed for a decent double game week in 28. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this draft. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of changes from a lot of different people. Give it a like if you enjoyed it and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. And I'll catch you again soon for some more videos.